Your Honour, members of the jury, first summing up, day 5. We've heard from Marceau. We've heard from the other witnesses. Can we possibly even think about Marceau being accused of such a crime? Let me explain. He's French, but really with so little of the resplendent eccentricities of a French man. Really and truly, if he was in France, he'd be like a cardboard cutout. Very few people would even notice him. The emotional climb towards the day he met the Arab and the other Arab men was slightly emotional, not? Marceau had no way of accepting or registering this. Think of it this way. His emotional capacity is that of a pet dog. You've seen his lack of expressions. All the more there, but in reality there is little understanding by this man. He's a void of emotions. An emotional processing is not available to him in the same way it's available to us. Let me explain. What is in front of him is face value. You must know other people like this. However, look at what he's faced. The death of his mother, the speed of the funeral, the lack of true compassion, the timing, the time available to him to show and register true compassion. And also the lack of knowledge. His mother didn't even inform him that she had this other man. Then comes in the neighbour. Goodness me, distraught and talking of his lost dog. A dog closer to this neighbour than anybody else in anybody else's life. And yet, Marceau says he sees the neighbour abuse and neglect that dog over and over again. But do we interfere with that sort of thing? I mean, the dog isn't physically badly harmed. It's not in a vet every day. There's no blood. No, we accept. We always do accept. We turn a blind eye, don't we? But for Marceau, that abuse, that neglect, stays in here. As I realised earlier, talking to Marceau, he has the emotional capacity of that dog. But is it right, therefore, to abuse and neglect Marceau? Should his own mother have been allowed to shut him out of her life, leaving him isolated and uncared for, not involving him in her own happiness? So far, we have these 2 incidences that are not small for him. There's a lot of emotion behind it, and it's just clogging up here, unprocessed. Now we have 2 further ones. The night Marceau hears the shouts from his other neighbour. And those cries must have distressed him further. Of course, no one interferes with domestic arguments. You just don't, do you? You hear a man and a woman fighting. You know that they live together, or at least that's what you think. You don't charge in there and say anything. We just don't. Marceau was the same. But it built up in here. Marceau knows what's polite and what is not. So he suffered these cries, which added to the pile of emotional turmoil building inside his mind. Oh, you may say, this is because he ignored the human cries from this, and he has no soul. But no, please. He just cannot process this information quick enough. This is no crime. It's a huge sadness that a man holds these emotions raw and raging in his head, trying to quit them as we do by rationalising them, accepting them. But we weep, we hug other people in our pain, but not Marceau. That isn't his way. He was being required by everybody around him to be strong and to show strength. He had to listen to his neighbour about the dog and not rudely point out about the abuse and neglect. To stay friends with his abusive woman beater of a neighbour next door, to keep the peace in his house. To let his mother be cared for to high standards by others and accept that he would lose her forever. How could anyone bear this bursting bag of agonies inside them? Of course, then, more emotion comes. Oh, positive, yes, but still more emotion. And covers all this dread and creeping around inside his head. For his Maria, in all her sweetness and, proposes they should marry. Yes, his response is subdued, but she drags him from such a low point. Is it any wonder he hears her request at all? But this, ladies and gentlemen, this brave and beautiful declaration of love by Maria breaks the chains and opens the door of Marceau's prison of pain. Marceau is deeply, deeply happy. He's looking forward to being married, and he says so. She is his one true love, his beautiful Maria. And this brings on a further set of emotions, ones that you and I also have to endure. Protection. The feeling of needing to protect. So in the blazing hot sun of that day, knowing his repugnant and abusive woman-beating neighbour should not be his friend, but unable to be impolite because he believes all this man told him, the two loves joined at the beach house across the sands by way of a bus. And they went onto the beach. It was incredibly hot. They walked the beach. The heat was unreasonable. They met the Arabs and they were fearful. And Marceau witnessed the injustice the Arab caused by beating his friend, his neighbour, in front of him. He did nothing. Now, for someone in a state of needing to protect, that's very hard to deal with. The emotions, all the emotions he suffered, began to bubble up through his happiness. The sight of his friend, the memory of his other neighbour's lost dog, the memory of his dead mother. The feeling of belonging to Maria, the feeling of Maria needing him to protect her. What if this continued? What if this Arab was allowed to continue? Where would he stop? Would he come after Marceau? And therefore would he come after Maria? These thoughts must definitely have been going through his mind. And I imagine in time he'll work that out for himself. Members of the jury, you've heard the accusation that Marceau has no soul. But at the time of Maria's proposal of marriage, his heart and his soul met the precise moment, igniting that feeling of love. Men without souls cannot feel love. The passions rose, and his protectiveness, his sense of duty, his need to protect and face off danger exploded in him. The first time he'd ever felt that way. He went back to where the Arab lay, and yes, he shot the man who allowed the woman of his life, the woman who he wanted to spend the rest of his days with. He stopped her being threatened. The man had made a threat to Marceau and Maria's happiness, however secondary, and continued to do so if he was allowed to remain alive. This, ladies and gentlemen, was a crime of passion. Marceau is an upright and gallant man, of small needs and an extreme upbringing. He killed not for the sake of killing, but to protect the very thing he loved, to prevent Maria from being harmed any further. He killed the Arab out of love. Where in all this does this court believe he is soulless, a soulless killer who would ever be in this situation again, ever be a threat to society once he has learned and married his beloved Maria and settled down into blissful fatherhood? Yes, thou shalt not kill. That is our true commandment. Thou shalt not neglect. Thou shalt not show an intense amount of abuse. Marceau shows an intense amount of care for others, putting himself last. And his love towards his friends and his love towards Maria is outstanding. I, for one, look forward to his acquittal today and an invitation to their splendid wedding very soon. Thank you, Your Honour. Thank you, members of the jury.